Enter Lady Bracknell, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, and Augusta. Gwendolyn.
Algie.
Good afternoon, Algernon. I hope you're behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, those two things rarely go together.
Good dear, you're looking quite smart.
I'm quite smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, well, I hope I'm not perfect. That would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
Algernon, I apologize if we're a little bit late. Dear Mrs. Harebury has been a little bit ill since her husband's passing. My, she looks a mere 20 years younger. And I will have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta. Lane, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There are no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I checked twice.
No cucumbers?
Not even for ready money.
Thank you, Lane. That'll be enough. I'm sorry, Aunt Augusta. I regret to inform you that there are no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
No matter. I already had some crumpets with Mrs. Harebury, who, to me, seems to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I did hear her hair has turned quite gold with grief.
I'll have to agree, but from what, I just don't know. Algernon, I have a special surprise for you this evening. I've invited you to dine with Mrs. Farquhar. She is quite a wonderful woman, and she and her husband are delightful to watch.
But, Aunt Augusta, I regret to inform you that I, in fact, will not have the pleasure of dining with you tonight.
I hope not, Algernon. I'll put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is used to that.
I know, it is a great bore, and not to mention a terrible disappointment. But the fact is, I've just had a call from my friend Bunbury, and it seems that he is ill again. I mean, they say that I should be with him.
Seems a little bit strange. Your friend Mr. Bunbury seems to have curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind if he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, nor do I in any way approve of modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I am always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice, as far as for any improvement in his ailment goes. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season where everyone has practically said everything that they had to say, which, in most cases, was not very much.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta, I will speak to Bunbury. That is, if he is still conscious. But I am quite certain that I can promise you that I will be attendance on Saturday. Now, there is the thing, the music. I mean, if one plays good music, then people don't listen. And if one plays bad music, well, then people don't talk. And while it is a grievous inconvenience, we can go over the program that I've drawn up. If you will accompany me into the other room.
Well, how very thoughtful of you. Thank you, Algernon. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me?
Certainly, Mother.
Well, Miss Fairfax, truth be told, ever since I met you, I've yet to find a girl I quite admire ever since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you'd be a little more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, in an age of ideals. I mean, it's all over vogue. And even in the Upper East Side. The fact is constantly mentioned. And my ideal has always been to love someone by the name of Earnest. There's something that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned that he had a friend named Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
Oh, Earnest.
But suppose my name wasn't Earnest. Do you really mean you couldn't love me then?
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, but supposing it wasn't,
Well, that's clearly a metaphysical speculation. And metaphysical speculations have nothing to do with the true facts of life, as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't think the name of Ernest is all that great. I don't think it suits me that well.
Of course it suits you well. It has a ring to it. It's a divine name. And it produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I think there are lots of better names out there, like Jack, for instance.
Jack? No. There's very little music in that, if any at all. And it produces no vibrations. I have known several Jacks in my life, and they're all simple and boring. It's a domesticity for the name John. And all the women that I know that are married to men named John have no fun whatsoever. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, we must get married at once.
Married, Jack?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you, Miss Fairfax, have led me to believe that you're not quite indifferent to me.
I mean, I adore you, but you haven't proposed yet.
Well,
Nothing has even been touched on the idea of marriage.
Well, may I propose to you now?
Well, I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, I should have you know that, quite frankly, I'm inclined to accept.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yeah, but you're not saying it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will. Why, how long have you been planning this? You don't have much experience in how to propose.
I've loved no one in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose in practice many times before they actually do so. My brother does it all the time. All my friends tell me so. Why, what wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite blue. I hope that you always look at me just like that, even when other people are present. So, what was your overall reading of this scene?
Well, the scene was partially chose because it, allowed the entire group to participate in the acting part of the presentation. But moreover, I would say that this scene is very good at displaying the interpretations of each character, because the interplay between Gwendolyn and Lady Bracknell, Gwendolyn with Jack, Algy with Lady Bracknell, and Algy and Jack. And I think that because this scene offers many interactions with most of the characters in the play, I think it was a no-brainer in choosing this because it gets to show you the interpretations that we chose.
So, you keep talking about these interpretations of the characters, but what was your interpretation? How did you understand these characters in this particular scene or the play as a whole?
Good question. We can dive into that character by character. So, for instance, let's start off with Jack. Jack in this play is, a very unassuming person. He's very, one could say, serious, but not for us. I read Jack as this person that is going through life, not knowing which way is up and down, and having all of his little, schemes with his brother Earnest, of the name Earnest, of all of that, confusing even himself. And I think that's evident in how Dennis portrayed that character. His inflection, the way he spoke, very not demanding, not authoritarian, just very plain Jane, a plain, usual man. That's also evident in dress, which was another component of this process for us, was to really emphasize what the characters wore. Because, stepping away from Jack, we go to Lady Bracknell. Throughout the play, we envisioned her as this stuck-up, socialite, middle-aged woman. And that's evident in her dress. She has on her blazer, the pantsuit, the gaudy jewelry. But even her speech was very proper. Her inflection was very to the point, cut and dry. And that interaction with her daughter Gwendolyn, who was dressed very provocatively, showed a delightful contrast between the two people. And that's evident in when we're talking about character interpretation. You know, Gwendolyn, this is this very provocative, very flowy, doughy California girl. And the thing is, what was also very important for us with character interpretation was to show that through the interaction of other people. Because Gwendolyn is a perfect example of this. When she comes in, besides her dress, she's very proper. She says mother. She's very, you know, quick, trim, but as soon as Algie and Bracknell leave, Gwendolyn becomes her real self. She becomes this seductive force in with their relationship with Worthing. And, you know, that is really what I have to say about the interpretations of the piece through character, dress, interaction. I mean, that's obvious with Algie, too. Algie was dressed in a suit, obviously. He used, you know, superfluous language, like grievous and words like that, and usually used his facial expressions to, you know, signify what was going on, and that's how we interpreted this scene.
Did you come across in translating this interpretation into film?
Many. First of all, an interpretive choice of ours was to not set this play in the 1800s. I mean, the thing is it would just take too much time, too much resources into, you know, building this world that we really couldn't have. And we didn't want to, you know, just come in and film in a modern location, wear modern dress, use modern language, but just say, oh, it's the 1800s. We didn't want to do that. So we took the choice of filming this and translating this adaptation into modern day. And it proved a challenge to us on a lot of occasions. I mean, the thing is with a lot of the wordplay, we were not very liberal in changing the words as they were written, but in some instances we had to, because we wanted to be consistent with our interpretive choices, as well as not, you know, wearing things that are modern and saying it's 1800. We couldn't say that we filmed this in a modern location and say words such as decorative, or alas, or, you know, oh my word. We had to adapt it into, you know, something more fluid with this time period. And I think we did that very well. An instance where you can see that beautifully is the aside, well, not the aside, but the, you know, interaction between Gwendolyn and Jack when Lady Bracknell and Algie leave. Courtney did a great job in this. She actually took her lines and did not change them much, but through the interpretation that I gave her, was able to adjust them just enough. Instead of saying stuff like mama, she said mom. Or instead of saying stuff like the public pulpit or the provincial pulpit and the expensive monthly magazines, she said Vogue and the Upper East Side. And the thing is it wasn't completely pronounced, but I liked that. It was understated. And for the attentive audience, you could see instances like that and see how it was in a modern age and see how we adapted, you know, the actual words of the play to fit our interpretation. And yes, it was a challenge. I mean, there was block texts in the book, or in the script, that had very different language, very different style choices. I mean, the location we filmed in, it was a challenge to try to, you know, get all the different angles, but I think we achieved it nicely. And also just the filming choice about how we had cutouts of different conversations with people.
Right.
And melded them into one instead of just being one panned vision of an entire conversation, which we thought would be, you know, kind of stale. So we mixed it up a lot. And I mean, coming from people, coming from this setting, I think we did an excellent job in how we adapted this primarily, you know, staged work into a modern, into a relatable, and into a cool setting. And I think we did that quite well.
So performing a play is much different than simply reading through it. So what did you learn through this performance or this challenge?
Also a good question. Well, I would have to say that our original interpretations with just simply reading the text changed a lot. I think in one of the first run-throughs we said we wanted Gwendolyn to be this sweet woman and Jack to be this overpowering man, and it was just not working. When we started to actually look at the lines and look at how performing this scene in a space where we have would, make sense. So through reading the actual text a couple of times, we understood that Gwendolyn is provocative, that Algy is obsessed with himself, that Lady Bracknell is stuck up, and while concerned for her daughter, is basically a social, climber, an achiever. And we learned that Jack was this starstruck man who was just so in love with Gwendolyn that, he didn't know what was up from down. In the scene we chose, he is so starstruck by this girl, and this girl is so provocative and quick to action that they decide to get married within 3 lines of text. And from the original interpretations we had of the play, it didn't fit.
Mm-hmm.
So, through performing this scene, I think it was made more clear to us what Gwendolyn and what Jack and what Algy and what Lady Bracknell actually embodied. Because when you read a text, you don't get that sort of sense of, immediacy that performance gives. When an actor is sitting here and another actor is sitting here, you play off of each other. You see their mentalities. You see their inflection. When you're just sitting by yourself, in solitude. Excuse me. A little too much coffee. But anyway, in solitude, just reading a text, you don't get that sense of playback.
Absolutely.
And as characters in a performative space, we were able to understand the roles of each character more because we had the actual live interaction with one another. And I think that's something that's very important and very different in performance rather than just interpretive reading. And that's how we came to the interpretations. And that's something that we have learned through this process, is that actually when something is meant to be staged, it's not just about reading it. It's about having the interaction with an audience, with other actors, with all of the play and give that we can get through performance. And that's really one of the key things that we learned through this process.